Hey guys, good morning. It's me, Dr. Katz. This is going to be our next video in the blog series from Nothing's Off Limits. And I think I found a topic even scarier than coronavirus: teen sex. I call this one, Let's Talk About Teen Sex, Baby. Good morning. I thought I would launch right in on a sensitive subject that really shouldn't be that sensitive, and that's teen sex. Just hearing those two words together sends tons of people straight to the sand to bury their heads, or at least running to the other room to avoid the conversation. Stop avoiding it. It's not doing any good for us parents or for our kids. The thing I hear the most from parents is, I just know that she's not sexually active, but we're here for a checkup just to be safe, quote, quote. These words often signify some glaring truths. The communication and trust lines are not fully open between parent and child. The parent has suspicions and just cannot get them verified, but is hoping that I can. The parent already knows and is hoping that I can somehow shame the adolescent into stopping their behavior since they've been unsuccessful. And last but not least, the parent truly does have his or her head in the proverbial sand and truly has no idea what their child is up to. Let me be clear. These statements are postulations. They don't apply to everybody and every parent-child relationship. I'm just speaking from 27 years of experience and some things that I've seen. So reality check time. A lot of teens are having sex. And it is essential that we at least attempt to communicate with them and at least try to give them the tools and opportunities to value themselves and be safe. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention released the Youth Risk Behavior Study every other year, and this survey is conducted among high school students across the nation. Let's take a peek at the most recent results. So, 39.5% of high school students said that they were having sex. 41% of those were male, 38% female, and 30% of these students had sex in the 3 months just prior to the survey. 46% of these students were not using condoms. Just to drive these statistics home, this year we're in the 15 to 24-year-old age group. What? Now, add to these statistics the emerging teen sex trends, the gender fluidity of sexual behaviors, and the increasing rates of bisexual, pansexual, transsexual, and polyamorous behaviors among teens. Currently, 48% of teens identify themselves as bisexual, and 28% report that they are uncertain about their sexual identity. My head spins on the daily with all of the new terminology that I hear from my daughter's friends. And I have been told directly by teen patients that, quote, being straight just isn't cool anymore. In the interest of further head spinning, I've had patients tell me that they have had 30 plus partners between the ages of 15 and 18 without even batting an eye, like it's no big deal. Being a physician and seeing teens on a daily basis in the office and being a general counselor to my daughter's friends, these statistics don't surprise me, but they're sobering and sometimes confusing, to say the least. However, I have to keep these feelings in check somewhat if I want to be able to communicate freely with teens and encourage them to do the same. I still persist that open communication is the key to opening the door to attempting to help these adolescents value themselves and stay safe. I consider myself to be intelligent, and I know that sometimes my teen patients tell me things just to see if they can shock me. What they don't realize is that what they say doesn't really shock me per se, but it merely strengthens my resolve to try to communicate with them and educate them. I guess you could say it's kind of an unintended reverse psychology situation. Laugh out loud. But I also realize as I say this that my openness is not for everyone. I'm fully aware that I will never be invited to participate in sex education classes or lectures at local schools because I cannot bring myself to go along with the abstinence only discussion. I'm too practical for that. I bring slides, I present non judgmental facts, I tell anecdotes, I point out the pros and the cons, and provide them with the tools and information to be safe if they're going to choose to do this. This to me is far more preferable than to stand in front of them thumping on a religious reference and watch all of their eyes close and the proverbial lights go out within seconds, literally 30 seconds or less. Oh well, I'll save my counseling for the office. Now, speaking of the office, let me take you through one of my typical teen office visits. So every teen I see in the office gets one-on-one time with just me in the room with their clothes still on. There is no communication buzzkill quite like having to be naked in a flimsy dress while discussing personal details. So with clothes on and phones off, I insist, no distractions. We begin our discussion. If the teen is sexually active and or is interested in having sex, we begin a dialogue. First thing that I do is ask them what I call the big question. It's something that I ask in hope, but no expectations. I ask them point blank how they knew that they were ready to have sex. This really seems to stun most of them. In 20 I got a handful of thoughtful answers. Most of the time, I just get, I don't know, or it just happened, or if I didn't, I was going to lose so and so, whatever their partner's name is. What I'm really after with this question is finding out if any kind of thought process went into making the huge decision to have sex. I realize that most of the time the answer is no. I use this question as the lead in to our discussion about sex and the pros and cons. Usually it's a good icebreaker. After the question is let out in the open, I explain to the teen why I was asking in the first place. I explain to them that I'm hopeful that when they make a huge decision for themselves, that they stop and think about it first, just for a second. I tell them about my observations over the last 20 plus years with my teen patients. We talk about self worth. We talk about their sense of value. I emphasize to them that their own self worth is not just measured by their body parts or their sexual activity. I point out to them that they're incredibly important and that they're really masters of their own destiny and that every decision they make affects a future one. I also let them know that if they're already worried that their bodies are their only thing left to give, we've got much bigger things to talk about. Then we gently transition into a discussion about the pros and cons of having sex as a teenager. I set aside my temptation to soapbox and we just discuss some facts. I point out the great disparity in social maturity between men and women at that age. I talk about the reality of how long the act itself might last, despite bragging of most teenage men. I discuss with them the fact that the first several acts of penetrative intercourse are going to hurt. We talk about the risk of getting pregnant. We talk about proper use of condoms and birth control. I often get some squeamish faces at this point and reluctance to talk about body parts or even name them. At this point, I'm able to point out that being unable to even say the word penis or being comfortable with quote unquote dressing it appropriately probably means that it doesn't belong inside their vagina. This often gets a laugh and then an abrupt, serious, and thoughtful look. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm hopeful that it means that the patient is at least considering what I said for a minute. We then also talk about reputation and the consequences of that. Then we wrap it together by stacking the facts up against their perception of what the pros might be, those depend on the patient, of course, and give them the chance to evaluate. If the teen decides that no behaviors will be changing that day, then we start talking about how to keep them safe and without early unplanned pregnancies. And I arm them with as much info and tools and options after that discussion is over. And then after that, we then talk about the best way to keep them healthy and whether or not an exam would be warranted, and then that will be scheduled on a different day. We'll get to the discussion of teens and exams in a different blog, don't worry. So the bottom line, though, is we've got to be willing to at least attempt to be open with our teens about the realities of sex and keep our eyes on the prize goal. Keep them safe and healthy, both emotionally and physically. That's all we're really talking about. It's not always easy by any means, but it's definitely important. So have a fantastic day. Bye bye.